Hello, welcome to Jennifer's Magical Book Club. Today I'm going to continue from chapter 3, page 28. So let's start. For some reason, saying my name was the hardest thing of all for me to do. It didn't start with B or P, but it was a sound that refused to budge inside me, no matter how much gentle air I peeled on it. And to make matters worse, my first and last name started with the same sound. I hate trying to say my full name more than I hated anything in the world, including commas. I reached in my sweetie pocket for my pencil, but most of the time a pencil toss didn't help when trying to get my mouth to make the sounds that started my name. My throat was already tightening up and air was getting hard to come by. I couldn't find a pencil anyway because my hands were shaking. My throat and my stomach knotted tighter when I thought again about the sound. I put my top row of teeth to my bottom lip to try to push it out. Nothing. I pushed harder. Nothing. I jerked with my right hand to pretend I was tossing a pencil, but by that time I was out of breath. Mr. Spiral stood there waiting on me, smiling and looking straight at me just like Ma'am always did. The only thing to do was to make another one at the sound by tracking another deep breath and starting over. The thought of another breath tightened me even more, and so against all good reason and against my teacher's rules, I held my breath and continued to try to push out the sound with all my might. The last thing I remember was seeing a fly buzzing around Mr. Sparrow's porch light. The light got brighter and brighter, and the fly got bigger and bigger, as big as my father's airplane and buzzing just as loud. Then the porch light and all lights everywhere went out at the same time, like when a big lightning storm hit our neighborhood. When I came back to my senses, I was sitting on Mr. Sparrow's porch with my back against the wooden planks of his house, and the coins he had dropped in my hand scattered everywhere. Mr. Sparrow held one wet rag on my head and dabbed at my lips with another one that was splattered with blood. He was squatting down beside me, and he had this big smile on his face. He wasn't laughing, but you would have thought he had just finished watching Sid Caesar on TV. I couldn't figure out what he could be smiling about. Feeling a tad better? I nodded. I'm going inside to get additional wet rags. I want you to sit right here and think about how well you are going to pitch in your next game. He got up from his catcher's squat easily. I couldn't tell how old Mr. Sparrow was, but he was in good shape. His forearms were almost as big as my thighs, and I had pretty big thighs for a kid my age. How did Mr. Sparrow know I was a pitcher? The night couldn't get any more upside down. Mr. Sparrow came back to the porch and handed me more wet rags. Let me see if I can recount the recent events. You simply nod your head if I'm correct. Mr. Sparrow talked in a voice that let you know he was getting down to business. He folded his big arms across his chest. I watched him from the corner of my eyes and never saw him blink. When I asked your name a moment ago, your inability to produce that sound due to your speech impediments caused you to Interrupt your normal breathing pattern. He sounded official, like he was calling a baseball game on the radio. You held on too long, trying to make the sound, and while doing so, you bit into your lower lip. I dabbed my lip. The bleeding has almost stopped. You then fainted from lack of oxygen and the sudden rigidity of your muscles. Do I have all that correct? I nodded. His big arms reached out and lifted me like I was a little kid. Let's get off the porch floor and sit on the swing. However, we swing. I had never heard anyone say since, but I knew it was short for shall not. I loved contractions as much as I hated commas, because when two words were rolled into one, it meant there was one less word to stutter on. The way Mr. Sparrow talked to me was exactly the way Ma'am talked, even though the words they used were different. They both looked straight at me and made me feel like I belonged right where I was. My hat had cleared and the flies buzzing around the light fixture on the porch were back to regular fly size. Need to go. I pushed out the gentle air and the three words in such a whisper that I wasn't sure Mr. Sparrow heard me. Yes, I'm sure you do, but I'm going to suggest we sit on the swing a while longer to make you certain you have your feet properly under you. Not only did I like how he used the words, but I also liked how deep his voice was and how he made his words come out so even. You don't have to talk while we rest here. In fact, you probably wouldn't be able to get a word in because I can easily hold forth for the two of us. Mr. Sparrow made a little laughing sound under his breath. I'm an old man with too much time on his hands, and not many people have dialogue with. You don't need to worry about your lip there, but your ears may drop off from being bombarded with my words. Smiling was the last thing I felt like doing after almost biting through my lip, but I couldn't help myself with Mr. Sparrow talking in his radio voice. Firstly, let me guess that you're probably a little embarrassed by what just occurred. No need, young traveler. We all have all our deficits, but no ledger will be tell it here. I didn't understand the words exactly, but I knew what he meant. I nodded. Secondly, you also are concerned that I may think less of you because you can't radially enunciate your name. Mr. Sparrow was looking straight at me, and the way he was talking made me want to look straight into his eyes, even though my speech teacher said I had the bad habit of not looking at people when they talked. Let me share with you, my young messenger of the news, exactly how I judged thee. He sounded like he was reading from Ma'am's Bible. I know you to be a good friend of young authors. By the by, young author says you have more velocity on your fastball than anyone in the 6th grade. Mr. Sparrow made like he was holding a baseball in a 2-fingered grip. And while young author is proud to be called your catcher, methinks he is more proud to call you his friend. Thus, all that is vital to know is that you have won and continue to earn the friend and respect of a fellow traveler. That constitutes the tote and some in my book. Like I told you, I understood what Mr. Spiro was saying, even though I had never heard anyone talk like that. His words felt extra important by the way he said them. And he didn't call Rat a hint catcher. Rat always hated that. We sat on the swing without talking for a while longer, and then Mr. Sparrow got to his feet. Alice, you seem to be recovering at good speed. I'm sure you need to be on your way, but permit me to step inside my berth for a moment. I didn't know what time it was, but I knew I was going to have a tough time beating it home by 7 o'clock. It wasn't pitch dark yet, but more flies were swimming around the porch light, and a few lightning bugs were worming up out in the yard for a big Friday night in Memphis. Mr. Sparrow returned with what looked a little like a corner of dollar bill and sat down again beside me on the swing. On the George Washington side of the piece of the bill was a word hand-lettered in black ink, Students. Mr. Sparrow put the piece of the dollar bill in my hand, along with the 95 cents he had scraped up from the porch floor. Consider this slip of paper your extra compensation for this week. You have 3 more weeks to clean your golden fleece in its entirety. I stood to go and thought I should say something or even shake Mr. Sparrow's hand. Now, young traveler, be off with the wind. The way Mr. Sparrow talked me think I was part of a ceremony. Thanks. You're more than welcome. I walked out of Mr. Sparrow's yard, and once I was out of his sight, I started running down Vance and then turned on to Herbert's. When I was nervous, after I did some bad talking, the best thing for me to do was run until there was no more breath in me. I came to 1396 Herbert, hoping there might be an envelope close pinned on the door or the letter box. There was no porch light on. I walked up the steps and rang the bell, not knowing if I could get Paperboy out of my mouth if Mrs. Worthington came to the door. I wanted to see her in her green dress, even if I couldn't say anything. I rang the bell again. No answer. I started for Rat's house, feeling like I do whenever an umpire calls off our bowl game because the field is too wet. Rat's mother saw that my lip was swollen, but she didn't ask what had happened, and I handed her the night's collection. Rat's mother was nice, but I could tell that she was one of those grown-ups who always was uncomfortable talking to me. When I got home, I could see Ma'am in the kitchen. I didn't want Ma'am or my parents to see my busted lip, so instead of going in the kitchen door, I went in the outside back door that led to the back stairs. In my room, I looked harder at the corner of the dollar bill. I saw that the word student was printed in a careful hand. I guessed that Mr. Sparrow had written the word. I wondered if he kept parts of dollar bills lying around his house with words hand-lettered on them. I decided to put the piece of dollar in my leather billfold that my father had brought me from one of his trips. I kept it in my desk drawer along with my wristwatch that I had stopped wearing after a friend of my mother's asked me what time it was and I couldn't say it and the man thought I was an ignoramus who couldn't tell time. I liked the watch but because it had the kind of metal band that slipped over my hand, but all it was good for was to put around my billfold. While I was at my desk, my mother called from the hall that she and my father were going out to eat with friends and that Ma'am was cooking fried chicken for me. I changed shirts and went down to the kitchen. Ma'am was putting a big plate of chicken on the table. "Lummy, little man, how'd you bust that lip?" I told Ma'am I tripped over a curb trying to get home before dark. I didn't lie to Ma'am very often because I knew she would catch me quicker than most grown-ups. "Wants me to cut some chicken off the bone for you? Takes more than bust, more than fat lip to keep me away from your chicken." Ma'am smiled because she knew I used up a lot of words to try to pay her a compliment. I ate 3 pieces. Ma'am was working in the kitchen when my parents got back home from eating out. I went to the top of the stairs to try to hear what they were talking about. My mother started telling Ma'am what to order from a grocery and what to cook for the week. Ma'am never wrote anything down, but she could remember every little thing my mother told her. I heard Ma'am open the pantry door to put away her apron, and then my father came into the kitchen. "Good night, Nellie. Mr. V, if you see that Junkman-era tea hanging around here, be sure and let me know." "Sure, Nellie. Which one is he?" "He be the tall one, always in a coat and hat and has the most junk fixed to his skirt." "What's the problem?" "I noticed a little and I just don't trust that man to leave stuff alone." "I think I know that you're talking about. I'll keep an eye out. By the way, Nellie, how do you think our boy did on his first night of collecting?" "I reckon all right, Mr. V. He ate him a big supper." Sleep was a hard time coming after what had happened on Mr. Sparrow's porch, and I couldn't figure out why Ma'am was so down on Era tea. I watched the shadows on the ceiling that cars made with their headlights when they came down the street. I didn't much like talking to strangers, but I wanted to talk to Mr. Sparrow again and to Mrs. Worthington. I thought about the first time I had seen her in her green housecoat with the flaps that she couldn't keep closed. But the thing that kept me awake the most that night was that I wouldn't have any way to cut the cords off my bundles on Saturday if Era T didn't have my knife already. That meant I would have to ask another carrier to borrow his, and that meant same night. So this is the end of chapter 3. I'm going to continue from chapter 4 next time. See you later. Bye!